What if I told you that the most successful product in Philippine history isn't rice, coconut oil, or even smartphones, it's skin whitening cream? Camera pans across a Manila drugstore shelf lined with dozens of whitening products, their bright packaging promising transformation. Every year, Filipinos spend over $2 billion trying to change the color of their skin. $2 billion to look less Filipino. Thunder roll. Lightning illuminates a young Filipina staring at her reflection, applying whitening cream with desperate hope. This is the story of a beauty standard so toxic it's literally poisoning an entire nation. A colonial wound so deep that mothers pass it to daughters like a family heirloom. A system so powerful that it determines who gets jobs, who finds love, and who gets to be considered beautiful in their own country. But here's the shocking part. It didn't start with Spanish colonization. Cut to ancient gold artifacts depicting dark-skinned Filipino nobles, their skin color celebrated in intricate detail. It started with something much more recent, much more deliberate, much more devastating. And what nobody tells you is, it's spreading across Asia like a plague, carrying Filipino self-hatred as its blueprint. Dramatic pause. Camera focuses on a child's hands, one naturally tan, the other artificially lightened by cream. But first, let me show you something that will shatter everything you think you know about Filipino beauty, identity, and the price of wanting to be someone else. Camera pulls back to reveal a massive billboard featuring a pale Filipina model towering over dark-skinned street vendors selling her image. The year is 1898. American soldiers march into Manila, cameras in hand, ready to document their conquest of the savage Philippines. But when they develop their photographs, they are confused. Cut to black and white photos of well-dressed, dignified Filipinos that contradict American expectation. The Filipinos don't look savage. They look civilized, educated, wealthy, even. Many are darker than the Americans expected, yes. But they carry themselves with pride, dress in fine clothes, live in beautiful homes. This creates a problem for American colonial propaganda. Close-up, American colonial administrator scratching his head over photographs that don't support the white man's burden narrative. How do you justify colonizing people who are clearly not primitive? How do you claim racial superiority over subjects who seem more sophisticated than many of your own citizens? The solution American colonizers develop will haunt the Philippines for the next 125 years. Cut to American-produced textbooks being distributed in Philippine schools. But look closely at the illustrations. They create a new hierarchy of Filipino identity based on skin color. The lightest Filipinos become civilized natives, suitable for collaboration. The darkest become primitive tribes, requiring American guidance. Everyone else gets sorted along a spectrum of worthiness based on how closely they resemble their white rulers. But here's what nobody expected. The Filipinos don't just accept this system, they internalize it, they make it their own. Cut to Filipino families beginning to arrange marriages based on skin color rather than traditional value. Within a generation, Filipino parents are teaching their children that lighter skin means better opportunities, higher status, more respect. But why? What makes this colonial manipulation so effective? The answer lies in something darker than anyone wants to admit. Dramatic zoom on a Filipino child being compared to her lighter-skinned cousin. The family's preference is obvious and cruel. Because American colonizers didn't create Filipino colorism from nothing. They weaponized something that was already there. The Spanish had started the process 300 years earlier. Spanish conquistadors arrive in the Philippines with a simple but devastating strategy: divide and conquer through racial classification. They create the Sistema de Castas, a racial hierarchy that puts pure Spanish blood at the top and pure indigenous blood at the bottom. But here's the brilliant cruelty of the system. Cut to Spanish colonial documents showing the complex racial categories that determined a person's legal status. They don't just oppress the dark-skinned Filipino, they give lighter-skinned Filipinos a stake in oppressing their darker compatriots. Mestizos, mixed Spanish and Filipino children, receive privileges denied to full-blooded Filipino, but only if they maintain their distance from their darker relatives. Close-up, a Spanish colonial painting showing a Filipino family arranged by skin tone, the message clear and cruel. It's the oldest trick in the colonizers' playbook: make the oppressed complicit in their own oppression by giving some of them crumbs from the master's table. And it works perfect. By the time the Americans arrive, Filipino society is already stratified by skin color. The Americans don't create Filipino colorism, they modernize it. They add American efficiency to Spanish cruelty, scientific racism to religious prejudice, industrial-scale marketing to individual insecurity. Cut to early American advertisements in Philippine newspapers promoting scientific, skin lightening methods. And this is where everything changes, because the Americans bring something the Spanish never had: mass media. 1920s Manila. American movie studios established the first Philippine cinema industry. But when Filipino producers create their first films, something unprecedented happens. They cast only light-skinned actors. Cut to early Filipino films where even servants and villains are noticeably lighter than the average Filipino. Not because Americans demand it, because Filipino audiences do. 300 years of colonial conditioning have created a generation of Filipinos who can't imagine beauty, success, or heroism in brown skin. But here's the most heartbreaking part. Close up, a Filipino film director explaining why he won't cast dark-skinned actors, his internalized racism obvious and painful. The discrimination isn't coming from colonial masters anymore. It's coming from Filipinos themselves. They've become their own oppressors. Meet Maria Clara Santos, born in 1925 in rural Ilocos Norte. She's naturally dark-skinned, like most Filipino, but her mother has big dreams for her daughter. Cut to a poor Filipino family gathered around their dark-skinned daughter, their love mixed with worry about her future. Every peso the family can spare goes to skin whitening treatments. Lemon juice, rice water, imported creams, even dangerous chemical peel. You must be beautiful to succeed, her mother tells her. And beauty means light skin. But Maria Clara asks the question that haunts every dark-skinned Filipino child. Close up, young Maria Clara's confused, hurt expression as she looks in the mirror. Why does beautiful have to mean not looking like me? Her mother doesn't have an answer, because the answer is too painful to speak. Beautiful means not looking Filipino. Maria Clara moves to Manila to work as a secretary. She's smart, qualified, hard work, but she doesn't get the job. It goes to a lighter-skinned applicant with inferior credential. The hiring manager doesn't say it's because of skin color. He doesn't have to. Everyone understands the rule. Cut to Maria Clara walking past shop windows filled with whitening products, each one a reminder of her supposed inadequacy. But Maria Clara does something that will change Philippine beauty standards forever. She gets angry, not at herself, not at her dark skin, at the system that taught her to hate it. And that anger leads her to a discovery that will shock the entire country. She starts researching the history of Filipino beauty standards. What she finds in old Spanish documents, American colonial archives, and pre-colonial artifacts will expose the lie that has poisoned Filipino self-image for centuries. Cut to Maria Clara in a library, surrounded by historical documents, her expression shifting from confusion to horror to rage. Pre-colonial Filipinos celebrated dark skin as a sign of health, strength, and beauty. The darker you were, the more respected you were in many communities. Light skin was associated with sickness, weakness, or foreign contamination. Spanish colonizers literally inverted Filipino beauty standards to serve colonial interests. Close-up, ancient Filipino gold artifact showing dark-skinned figures in positions of honor and power. But here's the most shocking revelation. The Spanish didn't just change Filipino beauty standards. They destroyed the evidence that different standards had ever existed. They burned pre-colonial artwork, melted down golden statues, and rewrote Filipino creation myths to make light skin seem divinely ordained. Cut to Spanish colonial records documenting the systematic destruction of Filipino cultural artifacts. Maria Clara realizes she's uncovered the greatest cultural crime in Philippine history: the theft of Filipino self-love. Maria Clara publishes her research in a small Manila magazine. The article creates an uproar. Light-skinned Filipino elites denounce her as a troublemaker. Colonial authorities try to suppress her work. Even some dark-skinned Filipinos reject her findings as unpatriotic. But something unexpected happens. Cut to Filipino women gathering in secret to discuss Maria Clara's research. Dark-skinned Filipino women start organizing, not for political revolution, but for something more radical: psychological liberation. They start beauty clubs that celebrate dark skin. They create fashion shows featuring brown models. They write poems about the beauty of indigenous Filipino features. Close-up, Filipino women applying traditional makeup that enhances rather than lightens their natural skin tone. For the first time in 300 years, Filipinos are challenging the fundamental assumptions of their beauty culture. But the backlash is swift and brutal. And this is where the story becomes dangerous, because challenging colorism in the Philippines isn't just about beauty, it's about power. Light-skinned Filipino families have built their wealth and status on the assumption that they are naturally superior to their darker compatriots. Maria Clara's research threatens the foundation of Philippine class structure. Cut to elite Filipino families meeting to discuss how to silence the dark skin movement. They don't just attack Maria Clara's research, they attack her personal. Newspapers run editorials questioning her sanity. Society magazines publish unflattering photos emphasizing her dark skin. Anonymous letters threaten her family. The message is clear: challenge colorism and face social destruction. But Maria Clara has allies no one expected. Cut to American colonial officials secretly supporting her research, not because they oppose racism, but because they want to discredit the Spanish colonial legacy to legitimize their own rule. It's a deal with the devil, but Maria Clara takes it. She needs any ally she can get, and this alliance will have consequences no one can imagine. World War II reaches the Philippines. Japanese forces invade, bringing their own racial ideology that complicates everything. The Japanese promote Asia for Asians, but establish their own hierarchy with light-skinned Japanese at the top and dark-skinned Southeast Asians at the bottom. Cut to Japanese propaganda posters showing light-skinned, civilized Asians versus dark-skinned, primitive ones. Filipino colorism, created by Spanish colonialism and refined by American rule, now gets a third layer of complexity from Japanese occupation. But something remarkable happens during the war. In the resistance movement, skin color stops mattering. Cut to Filipino guerrilla fighters of all skin tones working together against Japanese occupation. When you're fighting for survival, you don't care about beauty standards. You care about courage, loyalty, and skill. Maria Clara joins the resistance and discovers something that will reshape her understanding of Filipino identity. The most effective guerrilla leaders are often the darkest-skinned Filipino. They know the terrain better, blend in more easily, and command more respect from rural population. Everything colonialism taught her about the relationship between skin color and capability is proven wrong by war. Close up, Maria Clara fighting alongside dark-skinned Filipino guerrillas who display intelligence, courage, and leadership that colonial ideology claimed they couldn't possess. But when the war ends, the old hierarchies return with a vengeance. Liberation arrives, but so does the resurrection of colonial beauty standards. American GIs flood Manila with Hollywood movies, fashion magazines, and advertisements that reinforce the supremacy of light skin. The brief wartime equality evaporates like morning mist. Cut to post-war Filipino movies and magazines returning to exclusively light-skinned casts and model. Maria Clara, now 50 years old, watches her life's work being undone by peace. But she's learned something from the war that her enemies haven't. Resistance doesn't require permission. It just requires persistence. So she starts over, quietly building a new movement that will eventually change the Philippines forever. 1950s, the Philippine film industry enters its golden age, and Maria Clara has a plan. She can't force studios to cast dark-skinned actors as lead, but she can create her own films. Using money saved from decades of work and loans from sympathetic investors, she produces the first Filipino film to feature a dark-skinned actress as the romantic heroine. Cut to Maria Clara directing a revolutionary film scene where a dark-skinned Filipina is portrayed as beautiful, intelligent, and desirable. The film is a commercial disaster. Theaters refuse to show it. Critics panic. Audiences stay away. But something unexpected happens. Rural Filipinos, who rarely see movies, travel to Manila specifically to watch it. They weep when they see themselves represented as beautiful for the first time in cinematic history. Close-up, dark-skinned Filipino villagers crying as they watch themselves portrayed positively on screen. The film doesn't make money, but it makes something more important. It makes hope, and hope is contagious. Other filmmakers begin experimenting with darker-skinned actors. Fashion photographers start featuring varied skin tone. Beauty contests slowly begin to accept contestants who would have been automatically excluded a decade earlier. The change is gradual, subtle, incomplete, but it's real. Cut to a montage of slowly increasing Filipino media representation across different skin tone. But here's what nobody tells you. While the Philippines is making slow progress toward colorism awareness, something devastating is happening across the rest of Asia. Filipino colorism is being exported as a beauty standard to countries that never experienced Spanish or American colonization. Cut to skin whitening advertisements spreading across Thailand, Vietnam, India, and Korea, using Filipino models and marketing strategy. The poison that colonialism planted in Filipino consciousness is spreading across the entire Asian continent. And the Philippines isn't just a victim anymore. It's become a carrier. 2000s, the internet age arrives, and Filipino colorism goes global. Filipino overseas workers carry their internalized beauty standards to every country where they set. Filipino entertainment spreads across Asia, taking its light skin preference with it. Cut to Filipino soap operas being broadcast across Asia, their exclusively light-skinned cast setting beauty standards for millions of non-Filipino viewers. But something else is happening online. A new generation of Filipino activists is using social media to challenge colorism in ways Maria Clara never could. They are not just writing articles or making films. They are creating viral content that forces Filipinos to confront their internalized racism in real time. Cut to young Filipino influencers creating content that celebrates dark skin and challenges beauty standards. Meet Ashley Dizon, 22-year-old dark-skinned Filipina who starts posting makeup tutorials that enhance rather than lighten natural Filipino features. Her first video gets 50,000 views and 10,000 comments. Most of the comments are cruel, racist, devastating, but Ashley does something that changes everything. She responds to every single negative comment with education, patience, and unshakable self-love. Close-up, Ashley calmly explaining the colonial history of Filipino beauty standards to a viewer who called her ugly. "I'm not ugly," she says to the camera. "I'm indigenous. I'm pre-colonial. I'm what Filipinos looked like before we were taught to hate ourselves." Her response video goes viral across Southeast Asia. And this is where everything changes, because Ashley isn't just challenging Filipino colorism. She's giving other Asian women permission to challenge their own internalized racism. Thai women start questioning their skin whitening habits. Vietnamese women begin celebrating their natural skin tones. Indian women share stories about rejecting fairness creams. Cut to a global movement of Asian women sharing their natural skin colors and rejecting whitening products. The revolution that started with Maria Clara's research in 1940 has become a continental awakening in 2020, but the beauty industry fights back with everything it has. The global skin whitening industry is worth over $8 billion annually. The Philippines represents their largest single market. When Filipino influencers start convincing people to embrace their natural skin color, cosmetics companies declare war. They create new products that claim to be natural, while still lightening skin. They sponsor influencers to promote healthy whitening. They fund research that claims skin lightening is about health, not racism. Cut to sophisticated marketing campaigns designed to make skin whitening seem progressive and scientific. But they make a crucial mistake. They underestimate how deeply colonial trauma runs in the Filipino psyche. Every time a cosmetics company tries to defend skin whitening, they accidentally remind Filipinos of their colonial history. Every advertisement for natural whitening products reinforces the message that natural Filipino skin isn't good enough. The harder they push, the more Filipinos push back. And the pushback is led by an unexpected generation. Cut to Filipino children refusing to use whitening products their parents try to give them. Generation Z Filipinos have grown up with the internet. They've seen global beauty standards. They know that dark skin is celebrated in other countries. They are the first generation of Filipinos who don't automatically accept that lighter equals better. But they are also the generation bearing the heaviest burden of intergenerational colorism. Close up, a young Filipina arguing with her grandmother about beauty standards, both heartbroken by the divide between. "Lola, why do you want me to hate how I look?" the granddaughter asked. The grandmother can't answer, because she's never been asked to explain why she internalized her own oppression. These family conversations, happening in millions of Filipino homes, represent the real battleground where colorism will either die or survive another generation. And the outcome is far from certain, because here's the shocking truth about Filipino colorism in 2024. It's not just about individual choice anymore, it's about economic survival. Cut to Filipino job interviews where skin color still influences hiring decisions. Light-skinned Filipinos still earn more money, get promoted faster, and have access to opportunities denied to their darker compatriots. In a country where poverty means malnutrition, unemployment means desperation, and economic exclusion can mean death, choosing to embrace dark skin isn't just a beauty decision. It's a financial sacrifice that many families can't afford. This is why colorism persists even among Filipinos who intellectually understand its colonial origin. Close up, a dark-skinned Filipino woman applying whitening cream while crying, knowing it's wrong but feeling she has no choice. The system has made rejecting colorism a luxury that only the economically secure can afford. But here's what nobody tells you: the economic advantages of light skin in the Philippines are shrinking. Global companies operating in the Philippines increasingly value diversity. International markets prefer authentic Filipino representation. Overseas Filipino workers succeed based on skill, not skin color. Cut to successful dark-skinned Filipino entrepreneurs, artists, and professionals who are redefining what Filipino success looks like. The economic justification for skin whitening is becoming obsolete, but cultural change moves slower than economic change. Even as light skin loses its practical advantages, the emotional trauma of centuries of colorism remains. Filipinos who logically know that dark skin is beautiful still feel ugly when they look in the mirror. The wounds are deeper than economics. They are spiritual, and healing spiritual wounds requires more than individual choice. It requires collective action, which is exactly what's starting to happen. Cut to Filipino families, schools, and communities actively teaching children to appreciate diverse skin tone. The children who grow up learning that dark skin is beautiful will become adults who don't need to unlearn colors. The children who see dark-skinned Filipinos in positions of power and influence will associate success with competence, not complexion. The children who experience love and acceptance regardless of their skin tone will become parents who pass on self-love instead of self-hatred. Close-up, a Filipino parent telling their dark-skinned child, "You are beautiful exactly as you are." This is how colonialism died. Not through revolution, but through evolution. Not through anger, but through love. One family at a time. One generation at a time. One choice at a time. But the choice has to be made. Consciously. Deliberate. Repeatedly. Because colorism doesn't disappear on its own. It has to be actively rejected, challenged, and replaced. And that process starts with telling the truth about where it came from and why it persists. The truth that Filipino colorism isn't about Filipino culture. It's about colonial trauma. The truth that skin whitening isn't about beauty. It's about internalized oppression. The truth that preferring light skin isn't a personal preference. It's a political position that reinforces systems of inequality. And the truth that changing these systems requires more than individual enlightenment. It requires collective commitment to decolonizing Filipino consciousness. Cut to Maria Clara Santos' grave, now visited by young Filipino activists who consider her the founder of their movement. Maria Clara died in 1987, never seeing the full fruit of her resistance. But her research, preserved in archives and passed down through generations of activists, provided the foundation for everything that came after. She proved that Filipino colorism wasn't natural, inevitable, or permanent. It was created by specific historical forces, maintained by specific power structures, and therefore could be dismantled by specific acts of resistance. The young Filipinos visiting her grave understand something she could only hope for. They are not just fighting colorism anymore, they are winning. Cut to a diverse group of Filipino children playing together, their different skin tones equally celebrated and loved. Every Filipino child who grows up believing they are beautiful is a victory against colonialism. Every Filipino parent who refuses to pass on internalized racism breaks a chain forged by centuries of oppression. But every Filipino artist, influencer, or leader who celebrates dark skin rewrites the story of what it means to be Filipino. And every Filipino who chooses self-love over self-hatred strikes a blow against the colonial wound that has bled for over 400 years. The revolution isn't complete. The work isn't finished, the healing isn't universal, but the direction is clear. The momentum is building, the future is bright, and that brightness isn't about skin color. It's about the luminous beauty of Filipinos learning to love themselves exactly as they are. Final montage, Filipinos of all skin tones celebrating their natural beauty, their faces radiant with self-acceptance and joy. Filipino colorism will end not because someone will defeat it, but because Filipinos will outgrow it. They'll remember what their pre-colonial ancestors knew. That beauty comes in all colors, strength isn't determined by complexion, and worth isn't measured by proximity to whiteness. They'll teach their children what colonialism tried to erase, that being Filipino is something to celebrate, not something to escape. And they'll create a Philippines where the question isn't, how can I look less Filipino, but, how can I be more authentically myself? That Philippines isn't a dream anymore. It's a destination, and the journey has already begun. One choice at a time. One child at a time, one generation at a time, until the last whitening cream sits unused on the shelf, until the last colonial wound finally heals, until Filipino beauty is defined by Filipinos, for Filipinos, as Filipino. That day is coming, and when it arrives, it will be the most beautiful day in Philippine history, because it will be the day Filipinos finally see themselves clearly, and what they see will be magnificent. Fade to black. The sound of Filipino children laughing, their joy unmarked by shame, their voices free from the whispers of colonial ghosts telling them they are not enough. The children are beautiful. All of them. Exactly